So, innovation and driving digital innovation in 25 minutes. Doesn't give us long. But to begin with, maybe you could give your views about this topic, and in particular, what in your own organizations you're doing with digital innovation. And I know Emirates MBD quite well, so you guys have been doing some interesting stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. You're right. It is quite an interesting topic. It's the buzz theme these days. But just to summarize it, I think it started off with this question of why, and there have been a few areas to touch upon. First, it was fintechs, then it became tech fins. And the whole thing is that you can address it from 2 or 3 dimensions. The question to the answer of why. Cost has been the obvious one, but the experience in the industry has been pretty straightforward. They are easy to do, but difficult to manage because you tend to compromise the client experience. The second thing is that while we talk about change, what we've learned in our transformation, which is well underway and well publicized and reasonably successful, is that finally, it's worth focusing on what's never going to change. So we looked at it from the client lens, and we started focusing a lot more now on whether we are saving money for the client or we are helping them make more money. And with the help of regulation being actually a differentiated advantage, what we are focusing more and more on is why are we doing it in the first instance. So a lot of cost initiatives, which are low-hanging fruit, have been again focused around the final test, which is that how do they alter the client experience. And then right at the end of it, which is not easy to do, we are still working on it. Some of my colleagues are in the room. Evans has been with you since morning, our Chief Digital Officer. What we are trying to do is also digitalize the workplace. So, for example, how much paper we are taking out of our own processes. So finally, like Amazon does, there's an empty chair in the room, which is the client. And we're trying to see that what doesn't change in the client world, we start focusing on that, and therefore we can deliver value.
We've got 2 empty chairs, so it's 2 clients. Pamela, welcome.
Thank you.
I think most of us know HSBC, but again, driving digital innovation, can you give some examples?
Sure. So I think driving innovation in a global organization, the size and scale of HSBC with over 250,000 employees is not easy. It's not easy for a small organization, but especially for a large one. I think one of the challenges is knowing what's happening in all areas of the group. Organizations tend to either follow a more centralized model for innovation where they have an innovation team that develops for the organization, or they have a decentralized model where it's everyone's job in the organization to innovate. And both of them have challenges. If you have a centralized team, then it's kind of like, oh yeah, that team over there in the corner that's doing something and I don't know about it. But then if you have the decentralized model where everybody's job is innovation, then it kind of becomes like a side of the desk hobby, where I really want to do that, but I'm finding it difficult to do it. Almost like the treadmill that's in the corner. Like I know I should be doing that, but I just don't have the time for it. So I think we've tried to do a little bit of both. We have a team that looks after innovation that kind of gives our employees a playground to work in and gives them a framework of how they can do innovation and not think of it as something separate from their job. It's actually part of their job. And then we also are starting to form entrepreneurship teams where we spin out a team from the organization that actually sets up a separate venture to work on a specific problem that's linked to the strategy of the company. So that's a couple of things that we've been working on.
Thank you. Alberto, with RACBank?
Yeah, I think the main difference is obviously scale, especially listening to HSBC. The key driver for us has been being obviously more regional. It's just about empowering change end to end. So the key driver for us has been, and that's literally where my appointment came in, just as a catalyst, trying to execute end-to-end value drivers and bringing people in who can help us uplift the capability that we have within the bank. And then anchor those kind of key drivers or KPIs very high up in the organization, and then empower that person or that team to literally execute end-to-end. So everything from strategy to transition state to literally the change management and getting it out. And that's where we probably have an advantage, where we can almost operate more kind of fintech or smaller company aligned than the bigger giants. And I think that's where we, in the long run, also can make a bigger difference. Obviously, the smaller size then also brings some challenges with value funnels and how much we invest versus return of investment, because it's almost obviously a smaller funnel. But I think we're trying to find that kind of midway and just empower teams to own it end-to-end.
And Sigir from Habib Bank.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my organization, because I think that will put in context what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. As you can see in the panel, I'm the only one with the beard. So our organization is a little bit different. Not just me, but my organization. What's different about my organization? We are a universal banking model. So we deal with everything from the individual to the small SME, to the large SME, to the investment banking deals in the country. Second, we happen to be based in Pakistan, but we operate across 19 countries. So what we want to do is make sure we deliver value to all the countries in which we are a guest and the regulators allowed us to be there. Third, like many emerging market banks, our banking system is not as well evolved in many ways. Whether you talk about capital markets, whether you talk about the depth of the stock market, or the number of people who have access to banking services. It's a country of 220 million people, and only 20% of that population has access to banking. We're talking about 40 million people or 45 million people having bank accounts in a country of 200 million people. So financial inclusion is a very big piece of what we believe we ought to do and we are required to do if we are to serve the country and the benefit of our shareholders. Our shareholders believe in these things, so the shareholders push us not just to do things for the bank, but to do things which help the country's financial system evolve. If you think about those issues, we looked at it and we said, how do we approach the issue of transformation, innovation, digitization? Because digitization is big, it's part of what's coming. We truly believe banking services are going to change radically. Retail was the first sector to be disrupted by new technology, and banking is going to be the second sector. Let there be no doubt about that. Now, how do you then get yourself ahead of it or become a dinosaur in that? We believe it's through ensuring innovation takes place in the whole company, not in any one department. It's hard work, it's tougher to do, but unless you engage the hearts and minds of all the staff in every area, you will not truly help understand what the customer issues are. We approach it from a customer value creation point of view. What is it the customer today is not getting from us or from anybody in the country? And if we want to offer that product or service, how do we design it in a manner that creates value for the customer and the shareholder? So it can be from new revenues to cutting costs. But cost cutting itself is not an objective. To me, any organization just looks at cost cutting is going to go out of business. You have to talk about how to serve customers better, give them better value, better service, because that will generate business, which will allow you to fund whatever you need to fund. So if you take a view of customer, what is the customer problem and how innovation can solve it, that requires the whole organization to be engaged. Because a teller will know that problem, a dealer will know that problem in the trading room, or a corporate bank RM will know that issue. Now, how do you do that? You do that from creating awareness. So good communication strategies. You do that by being very clear where it sits in your priority. In our company, it is the top priority. Our board statements, if you look at our annual reports, it talks about it. Our board allocates a certain amount of time to discuss it every board meeting. To our management, its management strategy has publicly articulated. So if you look at our investor presentations, if you look at our management meetings, it's up there. So you have to show that you mean business and you are serious about getting it done. How do you do it? That's the last point. Strong governance. You have to convert these things into execution. Execution is key. It's good to talk about things, it's even better to do them. By having a very strong model to follow on each initiative on innovation, we are able to drive innovation in a large organization at a slower pace than we would like, but moving forward.
Thank you, Skip. And last but not least, Dara from Garanti BBVA.
I think, can you hear me? Okay. So I'll take over. As the innovation team at Garanti BBVA, one of our roles is to help and coach different teams across the bank to transform their ideas into scalable solutions. And one of the things that we say and repeat over and over is to focus on the problem, finding a problem to solve. And we try also to apply this to ourselves. And the problem we defined in regards to innovation, especially in big organizations like banks, is that there's so much, especially in the financial institutions, so much coming at us from the regulatory side, from the competition, from the fintechs, that we don't have time to focus on projects who will get realized in Horizon 2, Horizon 3, what I mean by that, in a couple of years' time. And most of our resources go really into sometimes catching up with competition, or sometimes rolling out a new product, but who will be easily copyable by the competition. And we lack, we don't have the focus to work on the projects who focus on longer-term projects. And to solve that, we decided to have a separate channel, which is really apart from all the central project approval processes, and have a dedicated pipeline to feed this channel with projects who look into the future. I will go more into details in the following sentences, and also in my keynote tomorrow. But the basic steps are: first, to pick the correct projects, because having a separate channel for yourself is really an exceptional thing in a bank. So we really have to define what is innovation, which projects are innovative for the bank. So we start by defining innovation, then getting the means to realize all those ideas. It can be budget-wise, it can be IT resources, etc. And then deploy the channels to have those ideas who will be future products flow to us.
Thank you, Dara. I'm going to do a reverse panel now, starting with Dara this way. And looking at the time we took for the opening salvo, we'll have to be a little bit tighter on our answers. But I wanted each of you to give a personal reflection rather than a company perspective. Because my personal reflection is writing and talking about the industry for so many years, that there was a statistic I had in 2007 that the top 100 banks of the world's annual reports had the mention of innovation 1.3 times on average in 2001 and 6.2 times on average by 2007. And then the global financial crisis hit. Well, sorry, the European and American crisis hit. And it went down to being off the table. And fintechs arose as something out of the ashes of that crisis. And now we have, this decade, seen a lot of innovation events, hackathons and open API days, that are actually innovation theatre. It's jazz hands, you know, it's actually not internalizing innovation at all. But I think finally, at the end of the 2010s, we are seeing the internalization of the innovation structure within most of the banks I talk to. But it's very difficult to internalize an innovation structure when innovation itself is meant to be breakout. So how personally do you think your experiences have gone over the last few years? And one of the particular things I wonder is, what sort of level of investment is the bank making in innovation? Because you know, people say with technology in most banks, 80 or 90% is going into just keeping the lights on. So how do you change that dynamic? Dara?
What you say is really true. When you say innovation, it's so really linked with creativity and finding new ways to do things. And how do you manage that? That's almost sounds like an oxymoron. But when you think about it, you can just let ideas and incentives come to you by luck, or just by trying to organize some hackathons, some events, etc. You really have to be specific and thorough with it. So that's why what I was saying, you really need to define for your organization, because innovation became a buzzword, as you said, but I think every single organization has to define what innovation means for them, because it can depend on scale, it can depend on geography, it can depend on strategic priorities. You can have a generic definition of innovation by which you select and prioritize projects. So you need to define it, and to define it, you have to ask yourself some questions. Which kind of projects do I have to focus on? And this is really some internal, I can call it soul searching going on. And this has to be done rigorously and in a very organized manner. You can't really just organize hackathons and pick ideas and try to realize them. They will never come true. So you have to define objectives, and then you have to create criteria based on those objectives to select your projects and what you're going to focus on. And then you might have some direction that you can follow through, instead of leaving it all to luck or people's imaginations.
I know you've already mentioned good governance and good communication, Sagir, but from a personal perspective, have you seen things changing, and are there particular experiences you've been through that you think has made innovation as part of the culture work better?
So I'll pick up two threads from your comments, Chris. Let's get the bad news out there first. This will cost money. Anybody who tells you I'm going to do it within your existing budget is not telling you the whole story. Look at compliance costs for banks. A few years ago, that was a topic of interest. Everybody said our compliance costs have gone up because the world standards have changed. Cybersecurity. Costs went up, and banks talk about it, that to be fully protected, we have to invest. This is the same. Digital will cost money. In your ROE, you'll see a drop for the first 3 to 5 years, and then it's going to pay its dividends. So the first thing is, our experience is, there is no free lunch. If you don't put the money on the table, it's not happening. Second, we strongly believe that a strategy with a purpose helps an organization move forward. Strategy without a purpose is an empty vessel. And there's data to prove it. You can look at data from PwC, you can look at data from Accenture, Harvard Business School, McKinsey, you name it. We believe, in our case, our purpose is financial inclusion, banking the unbanked. And as I mentioned, that's a huge deal in our country. So we are looking at how to use digitization and innovation to do that. So we launched a product. I'll give you one quick example of a paperless end-to-end onboarding. We launched it last September. And as of now, we have 4 million customers we acquired through it. 4 million customers on a customer base of 12 million. So in 1 year, we did more than what we did in 70 years in some ways. And most interesting to us was that in the country, the total number of women banking is 8%. In our organization, it was 12%. Through this, we've been studying the patterns, and 23% of the accounts being opened are by women. And that has a huge impact on the dynamics of small villages, towns, where women now have access to banking. So we have a very clear understanding that we are driving innovation through a purpose. Our purpose is financial inclusion. By having that focus, whether it's to do the same for SMEs. I mentioned SMEs is a big deal for us in Pakistan. We want to provide services to them. So financial inclusion, SMEs, and improving services to sectors which are not banked, we believe we can get value and we can get the motivation to keep this going because it's going to cost money.
Thank you, sir. Alberto.
So the personal angle, I think what's happened for the last few years is banks have come around the fact that we now are product technology companies. And we have enabled ourselves finally to kind of embrace technology, fintechs, and so on. So personally, I think you've seen a big move into a more kind of collaborative state. You'll see that with open APIs, sandboxes, all this. It's kind of a buzzword, but what it really means is we went from a model where it was a closed bank and fintechs were trying to kind of come in, and now it's more of a level play field where you have, you know, a standardized way of interacting with banks where you can extract the data and so on. You can build business models side by side. And the banks are now churning this. So you'll see, I mean, Rack Bank as well, right? Just being able to have create an open API model has now all of a sudden opened up a big box, a big closed world that earlier we were not even considering, but it's driving a lot of the thinking, driving a lot of the strategy, driving a lot of the problem statement solutioning that earlier was not there. So that's kind of my personal view is we've moved almost from transition stage 0 up to 3, and we can see us coming closer and closer, that kind of outside world and the inside world.
Thank you. Pamela.
Yeah, I think you're right. What you said, I think there's been sort of waves of innovation and disruption happening after the financial crisis. And, you know, I think before that time and even just in the last, since the last 3 years, banks were really so internally focused. You know, we need to solve our own problems and, you know, take care of our customers. And it was kind of like, you know, putting our arms around it. Now, you know, I think we're much more open and collaborative with partners, and, you know, seeing fintechs come in has been a very positive move for the banking industry, because now we're seeing, you know, companies that are solving problems that maybe we weren't thinking about before that maybe we should be thinking about. So, you know, the best option is to collaborate. You know, I think before a few years ago, now today, HSBC is one of Google's largest clients globally. A few years ago, you wouldn't have seen that kind of, or that level of collaboration. So I think it's definitely headed in that direction towards the future.
And last but not least, Sumit.
Thanks, Chris. You know, personal opinion, I think it's an existential challenge. And more than fintechs, the tech fins have shaken up the industry. It's the Alibabas and Googles of this world, because fintechs, you could almost act with some amount of hubris and say that, yeah, we'll collaborate with them. And the real challenge that has come up, and especially from the West and also from Asia, where I belong to, is that these challengers have proven that we suck at experience as an industry. And we realize that, you know, while we have regulation as a differentiator, we have balance sheets as a differentiator, we have a long history as a differentiator, clients are voting with their feet because the experience is terrible. So it's not innovation, it's actually reinvention. And we still believe that barring some parts of retail, it is still a question of, you know, creating at par kind of an experience. And for the bank, I'll not speak much because, again, I said it's publicized, but the point to note, and also from comments from Albert, is that there are many banks like Emirates NBD all over the world now who are without any regulation on open banking, because only UK has regulation on open banking, are going into APIs, first internal, then external, cloud. The whole architecture is being designed to probably get nimble and then create the experience so that we have a chance to defend, but potentially go after completely new revenue segments. Like we launched the digital-only retail bank, and we've announced the SME bank also. The digital bank has more than 250,000 clients in about 2 years' time, and it's targeted on millennials, which a 60-year-old bank, being the #1 bank in Dubai, doesn't matter, wouldn't be associated with. Yep. So it's both defending and being aggressive. And recognizing the fact that we've not delivered experience as well as we should have.
It's made me smile because I vaguely remember, but it's probably about 2006, talking with Emirates NDB in particular, and your peers, and people said to me, oh, you know, millionaires don't want digital. Back then, I think that attitude has changed.
Well, again, I believe that they do, and I'm kind of revealing my age. They don't really care whether it's digital or not. I think what fintechs and tech fins have proven, and challenger banks have proven, is a completely different level of experience.
Yeah.
We turn for, you know, I'm talking of businesses now, the number of people businesses hire to deal with banks is a great indication. And when we were the utility and we were the monopoly or duopoly utility since I joined banking, a lot of people would smile and bear up. And now, you know, one has to wake up and do something about that experience that our challengers are able to offer.
Well, the time up is flashing at me, so I have to say thank you again to the panelists for a great contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.